All right, Ecclesiastes in 2 lessons. So we're halfway there. So the first 6 chapters that we talked about last week, we kind of characterized those as different journeys. You know, let's go try wealth. Let's go try possessions. Let's go try wisdom. And seeking those things as an end in and of themselves. And ultimately, he just kind of paints a bleak picture. None of that's going to satisfy. And yet more and more, as we go through those first couple of chapters, we get a little sprinkling in, well, since this isn't going to do you any good, why don't you just enjoy the blessings that the Lord's giving you? Eat, drink, enjoy yourself. That's the gift that God gives you. So we go through each one of those, and at the end of each one of them, he commends the pursuit to a degree. Wisdom is good. There's some things you can learn. Money is good. That's helpful. But ultimately, he keeps coming back to, there's nothing better than to just enjoy what God has provided for you. And I think that's really where the conversation starts turning. As he gets into chapters 5 and 6, and as we go through there, he starts getting more and more spiritually focused. You know, he starts talking about when you make a vow to God, make sure that you meet the vow because God is watching. And so increasingly, you get a spiritual framework that he's operating under and instruction in that way. And remembering to enjoy the blessings that God gives you kind of sets the tone for the rest of the stuff that he's going to talk about in the next few chapters. So before we jump into chapter 7, there are a couple of things that are just too good, I think, in the first set of chapters that we didn't really talk about, but we really got to point them out. And one of them is the value of friendship and the value of companionship. You know, in Ecclesiastes 4, 9 through 12, he talks about 2 are better than 1, and 3 are even better, right? There's this notion that by yourself, you have limitations, but with companionship, there is more that is possible. You can stay warm from the cold. You can stand against your enemies more effectively. You can accomplish more things. And I think that's important for us to remember, because I think a lot of times we feel like we're going it alone when you're walking the Christian walk. The challenges feel like they're all yours. Surely nobody is suffering the same temptations I'm suffering. Nobody is tempted, to drink or smoke or, commit sexual immorality. That's only me. So it's only my little world. And we tend to get isolated that way. And so we need to remember the instruction that, having others, having companionship in anything that you do has value. And particularly in the walk that we have as Christians, this notion that we can lean on one another, that we can obtain strength in numbers, is something that we want to make sure that we not only don't overlook, but that we emphasize. One of the things I know people talked about that they missed when we couldn't have services and come together and things like that, and I think it's true, is just being together, just seeing that there's other people who believe in the Lord, who want to serve the Lord, who want to be with other people who do that. There's an encouragement just in seeing those faces. There's an encouragement in just knowing that you are not by yourself. So something to carry with us as we go through there. The other thing that I think is interesting, and it's almost, he kind of blows through it in a couple of different verses, but I want to make the point, is he talks about that we have a spirit side, and that our spirit side is different from the spirit side, say, of animals. And for reference, I'm looking at chapter 3 and verse 21. In 3:21, he says, "Who knows the spirit of the sons of men which goes upward, and the spirit of the animal which goes down to the earth? And then he talks about, I perceive there is nothing better. There are several places in Ecclesiastes where he starts sprinkling in this notion that we have a spirit that is somewhat unique, that is not the same as the spirit that an animal has, that, there's a part of us that is our life, our physical being, but there's a spirit side to us. And he even says that, at a certain point, it returns to God. There's an element of us that is different, that is beyond this physical. And if you think about Ecclesiastes as kind of trying out different philosophies about how you should live your life, one of the philosophies that people will get into is, this is it, This is all there is. We're here, we live, we die, it's over. And this is a place where, the writer says, no, there is more. And that's one of the reasons that you can take comfort when you see injustice that is not satisfied in this lifetime. You can take comfort because this isn't all there is. That there is a God watching, that there is a God who knows what is right and what is wrong and is watching what we do and will measure out justice when the time is appropriate. So I want people to kind of make sure that we don't miss those as we're rolling through all of these things because we're trying to walk through them quickly. Thoughts or comments on anything else that we talked about up to Rufus?
The word spirit, refers to several, more than just, in this verse it's talking about spirit of life.
Right.
And of course it can be our heavenly spirit that's eternal. And so you have to differentiate. When you see that word spirit, you got to differentiate it. It's 2 or 3 meanings in the Bible in the way it's used.
Yeah, Rufus is making the point that spirit, it has multiple meanings, that there's our eternal spirit, there's our life spirit, there are different biblical references to spirit. And I think that, I know, I agree. That is absolutely the case. I do think, though, that when you look at what he's talking about in here, he is talking about the distinction between our spirit and the spirit of, say, animals. And the reason I'm making that point is that's a whole thing too, right? We're just animals. We're just like the deer and the duck and all these other creatures. We just are another one of them. And the writer here says, no, that's different. And so I want to make sure we understand that, but that's a really good point. Thanks for making that. Other thoughts? All right. Let's step into chapter 7 then, because from 7 really up through the end of chapter 8, beginning of chapter 9, that sort of thing, he's kind of going to go all Proverbs on us again. He's going to get back to some practical wisdom. It sounds like it. It sounds a lot like Proverbs because he's talking about the means to have a satisfying life. And so some of the key things that he talks about, and he kind of starts off in chapter 7, is there's value in having a good name. There's a value to your reputation. And he's going to come back to that in a couple of chapters, But, the point that he's ultimately making is you develop a good name through your behavior, through the things that you do, through the wisdom of your actions, and yet, as he talks about, I believe it is in chapter 8 or 9, just like putting a fly in the ointment, 1 or 2 bad decisions and that good reputation is gone. And so he's talking about the value of it and how, and not just the value in terms of its worth, but its need for protection. Because you can have a good reputation ruined really quickly with some bad decision making. So something that he puts out there, and then like I said, in chapter 10 he talks again how easily we can lose that thing. People talk all the time about teaching their children, remember who you are, right? Remember that you're carrying my name out there when you guys go out and that kind of thing. And your kids remember that, but it's also important to teach them the why part, right? You know, I've tried to build a reputation, and it is whatever it is. You know, A, don't mess it up, right? But B, recognize the value for yourself that you need to build a reputation of character that is referenceable. So something that's in there. The other thing that he talks a lot about in chapter 7 is the end is better than the beginning. And he gives several examples of where that's true, but he talks about it at least contextually in terms of which party are you going to go to? In other words, he talks about, you know, the house of the mourning is better than the house of, you know, the party. And he's really talking about, you know, people who are, you know, either have passed away and there's mourning around that, or points in your life where, you know, those things come about. And what he's really talking about is, where are you going to collect the most wisdom? Which party is going to have wisdom present? You know, well, probably where people are trying to learn lessons and derive what's the meaning of life and that kind of stuff. That typically doesn't happen at, you know, the happy, hey, let's go out and have a party thing. That happens much more in the house of mourning, right? So that's where people are, you know, that's where he's saying you're going to get a lot of value as opposed to going to the house of feasting, you know. And really what I get from that is some journeys are better than others, right? When you talk about journeys and you talk about where you're going to go and what you're going to spend your time with, I don't think he's clearly not saying spend all your time in the house of mourning, right? Because that's the only place where there's value. So don't take that extreme, but understand that there are things to be learned from there. And so when you find yourself in that place, you know, seek out the wisdom that's available to it. Yes, ma'am.
And I think part of what goes with the house of feasting is not just, hey, let's go have a good time. But when I think about people who, you know, are at the bar every Friday and Saturday night, people who are going to wild parties, that's escapism. There is something in my life that I'm unhappy about. So I'm gonna go drink until I don't remember it anymore. But that doesn't take the unhappy thing away. It just puts it off for a little while. And I think part of the point here is the unhappy is still going to be there. When you get home from the house of feasting, you're still gonna have to deal with whatever it is. Better go to the house of mourning and figure out how to deal with that than to say, well, I'm just gonna go pretend it's not there for a little while and that'll make me feel good for a bit. But then I'm still gonna have this problem I've gotta deal with.
Yeah, and I think that fits really well with the idea that he keeps coming back to, which is what's really good, just enjoy the stuff God gives you. You know, contextually in our society, you know, it's Friday, it's happy hour, right? I've had a long week, it's been a very hard week, I don't want to think about my work life anymore, so let me go enjoy this, right? But I'm still going to have to go back to work on Monday, so I probably would be better suited to figure out why I'm, you know, feeling the need to go drink on Friday after work and try to settle that out. Now, not everybody operates in that way, but to Lauren's point, it is escapism. It is let me forget my troubles, you know, but they're going to come back. So I think that's an important thing. The other piece in here, and I think he says this is interesting. He says, wisdom is a defense, like money is a defense. So how is money a defense? Oh, come on. Ben.
Well, if you have enough of it, you don't need to buy things like insurance, because you don't have to be worried about something catastrophic happening to you because you have the means to take care of it. But you can use money to manipulate just about anything you want in this world. And so with enough money, you can protect yourself in many ways. Not in every way, but in many ways. Wisdom, though, also can do the same thing, handling yourself in a proper manner and correctly, and thinking ahead, planning ahead, plotting ahead of your enemies, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, Ben, you're right. And I think the parallel is a really good one, because a little wisdom and a little money are very similar, right? A little bit of wisdom can help you in some things. A little bit of money can help you in some things, right? And the more you have, the more things that they can help you out with. You know, Ben said if you have enough money, you can get out of almost anything that's a problem, and he's right. And we're not talking just about like buying the best defense lawyer. I mean, if you have money, you can get the best medical care, you can get, you can live in great comfort, you can have all of the things that you physically require, and you can get yourself out of trouble. And wisdom is similar. It's a defense. So you accumulate it against the idea that something is going to come for you. And if you think about it that way, I think you understand a little bit about why he commends wisdom, not as an end to itself, but as the thing that you want to continue to develop and grow and build over time. Because the more wisdom you have, the more prepared you are for the things that come at you. The other thing that I'll put out there with this, because you see this theme starting to recur in Ecclesiastes a lot, is this idea of preparation, of forethought, of considering things ahead of time. If you know that there's nothing better than to enjoy the blessings that God has given you, it helps set your priorities about, am I going to work myself to death, or am I going to go home and enjoy my family? Those kinds of decisions get pre-made because you're thinking ahead as to what is the purpose? What is it I'm trying to accomplish with my life? What do I want to be able to, if I'm blessed to get old, look back on and say, this is how I spent my life and I enjoyed it. So that idea of forethought starts coming in here, even more than just saying, hey, I went on this journey and it didn't work, and I went on that journey and it didn't work. He's giving you that information. But now he's starting to turn that concept around and say, be thinking ahead. Be thinking about what you want to be doing. And then you can kind of set your affairs in order. Lee.
Money cannot buy a person something that's eternal, but wisdom can lead you to something eternal.
Yeah, and that's certainly true. All the money in the world is not going to buy you an eternal home, in heaven at least. One way or the other, you will have an eternal home, but maybe not the one you want. But wisdom can lead you there. So in that respect, wisdom is better. But I think the parallel he's making here is neither of those things is bad. Money is not bad. Wisdom's not bad. He's kind of backtracking off of some of the things he said earlier, right? So he's trying to reset us a little bit. Tim.
Use them both together. There's a lot you can accomplish in this world, both good and bad. If there's people that are evil that have wisdom and know how to use it to their own methods and ends. But good people can take wisdom and money and do great things with that. But
that is absolutely true, and I think that's an important thing to consider. I think when we get to chapter 11 and we start talking about cast your bread upon the waters, it's going to be that kind of thought, right?
daily prayers, please give me wisdom, and then please bless me with what I can handle, and no more or less. So, I figured if the Lord want me to be wealthy, I'd be wealthy. But if my prayer and attitude is that I don't want the wealth if it's going to lead me to destruction.
Yeah, I think that's wisdom, right? There's some wisdom there that says, give me what I can manage. Don't put me in a place where I'm going to get myself in trouble. I think that's smart. I think the other thing that he talks about here in chapter 7 is, and he's starting to get plainer, right? I hope you see there's more and more references to God coming out of here. He says, think about the works of God, right? consider those works. Consider that the things that God does, we can't undo. You know, consider that the things God does, we really don't have that good of a grasp on, and we never will, right? He's getting plainer and plainer about, you know, there is not just a higher power, but there is a God that has put all of this stuff around us, and we need to start recognizing that we're not going to be, you know, if we live 1,000 years, we're not going to sort it all out. And so he's kind of taken us down that route, and that's something that we need to kind of see him doing as we get into the later parts of Ecclesiastes. The other thing that he says, and this is one of our age-old questions, he says, you know what? Sometimes the righteous die and the wicked don't. You know, sometimes a good man gets hit by the truck, and sometimes the wicked man lives to be 110 years old. And that's just the way it is. And so, you know, in chapter 7, he's laying a lot of practical wisdom out here. And he's basically saying, you know, you can't just look at what you see here to explain what goes on. You know, and that's a theme that he's starting to develop as well, that we're going to be seeing a bigger picture if we're really paying attention. Because of that, he starts talking about having some self-awareness. He starts talking about, let's not be too proud. Let's not think that we are the ones that know it all, because everybody sins, even you. And I like the way he puts it in there. He's like, you know, don't listen to what people say too much, because you might hear your servant say something about you that you don't like. But then he kind of couples it with, and oh, by the way, let's be honest, you've said stuff about other people too. And so he's kind of making the point, right, that nobody here is perfect. Don't get this idea that you've never done this, because somebody somewhere has seen it. And so keeping that in your understanding that you've talked trash about people before, so don't be upset if you hear people talking trash about you. Just understand it's part of the human condition, right? He says, God made man upright, but we have sought out many schemes. You know, it's not God's fault that we're off, you know, creating mischief. You know, God made us upright. We've chosen to go off on these different side paths that get us into trouble. So, having said that, he goes into there is nothing better than enjoyment from God. And he includes a couple of new things in here that, you know, again, start expanding on the theme. One of them is that even the most evil person that we run across, there's hope for them while they're still alive. But once you're dead, it's over. You know? And I like the phrase, a living dog is better than a dead lion. Because that's where he's getting right down to it. He's like, you've got so much time, however much time you have, to get it right. But once you're dead, there's really nothing that you can do about it. You're not going to know anything. You're not going to be able to change anything. You're not going to be able to direct anything. You know, so understand that that is true, and therefore enjoy eating and drinking. Enjoy your work. And here's a new one. Enjoy your wife. I'm going back to companionship, right? Which we kind of started tonight about, right? Enjoy the wife, love her, the one that you had from your youth, and enjoy that companionship together, right? So again, what are things God gives us? Well, he gives us food and drink and the ability to enjoy that. He gives us work and the ability to enjoy that. He gives us marriage and the ability to enjoy that. So the blessings of God are starting to mount up here. And every time he comes back to this theme, he adds a little more sauce to it, a little more by the way, think about this, because this is out there for you too. And in verse 10 of chapter 9, he talks about, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. There is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. We've heard this before, right? Whatever your hand finds to do, do it heartily as to the Lord, for you serve him and not men. Right? So many parallels here, right? That's what we're to do. And then verse 11, which is the famous line about this, right? Which is, the race is not to the swift, the battle to the strong, the bread to the wise, nor riches to men of understanding, nor favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to them all. You just don't know what's going to happen. Sometimes, incredible as it may sound, Alabama beats Ohio State in a football game. It's just mind-blowing. How could that be? But it did happen. So time and chance is out there. Yeah, I'm sorry, Derek, I just couldn't resist. Hey, it's all good, you won. But I think time and chance is one of those things that we fail to account for when we start demanding an accounting for why things happen, right? Sometimes there is no accounting. Sometimes the answer is time and chance. You know, the wrong thing happened at the wrong time, and this was the result. So if that's true, if time and chance applies to all of us in whatever measure that it's going to apply to us, what does that mean that we should be doing? Andy?
Preparing ourselves for whatever.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly. You don't know what's going to happen, so, you know, for lack of a better phrase, pay attention to what's going on right now, because this now might be all we get. You know, there might not be a walk back out to your car tonight, right? There might not be another chance for Ohio State to beat Alabama. You know, you just don't know what the time is going to be, and so we need to be aware of what happens now. And that's so much of the gospel message, right? That's so much of what we hear in the New Testament about, you know, paying attention to today while it's called today, right? Today is the day of salvation. It's a call not only not to procrastinate, but to understand that, you know, all you have is what we have right now. You know, and just because you've made appropriate preparations doesn't mean any of those things are going to make a difference. Tim?
Spent their entire existence trying to mitigate chance. Just look at the car you're driving now. If you buy a new one, I mean, you got lane assist, you got belt, you got the lights on your mirrors, you got all these things around you to help. The whole goal is to try to eliminate chance. The chance that you're going to pull into somebody else, the chance that you're going to back into something. And, you know, in my world in engineering, you know, our whole existence is to eliminate that chance. When you talk about, you know, producing dangerous chemicals, there's all kinds of controls. And so, and I think spiritually for us, you know, we should be living our lives to eliminate that chance that we don't make it to heaven. We got the Word, and we should be using the Word to prepare ourselves.
Yeah, I think you put it right there. I mean, no matter how much we try to eliminate chance, right? It's the pen in my pocket that actually ends up killing me in a car wreck because the airbag hits it or whatever, right? It's always something, you know. But the one thing we have control over is our standing with the Lord. And we have that opportunity to be prepared at all times, you know, which is all that we can really do at that point. So it's important to remember that, and to remember the other piece of it, which is there's no enduring legacy to what we do here. You know, People have spent their whole lives building for something that says, in 100 years, people will remember my name. Now, anybody that's been in a middle school history class knows that we don't remember your name. We write it down, but we don't remember it. So it's not about legacy. It's not about necessarily the future, but it's recognizing the here and now and the things that you can do with the opportunity that's on there. So, any other thoughts about that? Yes, sir.
The way I see time and chance play out a lot in the work that I do is, oftentimes when I start working with someone new, they've got some event that's about to happen that they're trying to plan for, and there'll just be a lot of anxiety and concern, and they will act as if there is this one perfect set of decisions that they have to figure out, and to where it becomes, the outcomes become binary. Either I identify this perfect set of decisions and I'm successful, or I'm a total failure. And so when you think about time and chance, it really stresses the importance of doing what we can not to worry, because it's not the things that we can imagine that will get us, it's the things that we might not be able to imagine that we can't even worry about because we can't imagine them. So just live your life, and that's what I tell people. There are a whole range of good decisions that you can make and some really bad ones. We're going to avoid the really bad ones, and we're going to work within this big, wide range of good things that you can do. And that's what I think about when I think about time and chance.
Yeah, and what you're talking about reminds me, the story that I think we've all heard before, right? The farmer that says, I can sleep when the wind blows, because I've done everything I can do. I'm going to bed. That's where we should be. I've done what I can do. I'm going to bed. It's all good. So, kind of keeping that in mind. You see how he's getting a bigger and a bigger and a bigger view, and he's looking at things, just a little bit differently. And then when we get into chapter 10, it's like he's led you down to there and he's laid all this out, and then he's going to go back and just give you some more practical wisdom, right? We're going to you need to protect your reputation. You need to watch out for bad leaders, right? Wisdom is good, laziness is bad. Watch your mouth, right? That's practical wisdom, right? That's stuff that you tell your kids when they go off to college, right? Watch your mouth, don't be lazy, right? Study, don't make bad decisions, don't hang out with the wrong people. I feel that, kind of here in chapter 10, but he's leading you to something else, and that's really where I wanted to kind of get to and talk about, is in chapter 11. He says, cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. What is he talking about? You're supposed to just throw bread on the water, get a loaf of wonder and toss it out there? No. First of all, they didn't have Wonder Bread back then, But what is he talking about when he says cast your bread on the waters? What he's really talking about, opinions vary, here's mine, is being generous. He's talking about giving of the things that you have. Not being somebody that's hoarding up the money, but making sure that you share it. Make sure that you share the things that you have with whoever might need them, whenever they might need them. And why do you do that? Because time and chance happens to everybody, and you might have the biggest barns full of the biggest bunch of stuff, and you die tonight. And then what good is it going to do? What makes more sense is to give it away and help people while you can. Do not, so Landon doesn't hit me afterwards, do not say Doug came out and said, cash in all your Social Security and all of your retirement accounts and give it all away. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying, be generous. and just cast it out upon the waters. Give it out. You don't know what's going to happen with it. You know, if you Google this verse, the number of stories that you will see about, I helped this one guy, and 20 years later, you know, he was a heart surgeon and he saved my son, or, there's 100 stories about time and chance coming together in a good way as a result of casting your bread upon the waters. Now, I'm sure this made a lot more sense as a phrase back when this was written. I've heard cast your bread upon the waters my whole life and never thought to ask what did it mean when I was a kid. You know, it just kind of like rolled over me. Okay, cast your bread on the waters, whatever that means. But the idea here is to share of our means. You know, and this idea of you don't know what evil will be on the earth, and really most of chapter 11 is talking about things you don't know. You know, what you do know is, and I'll pick on Ben because he's sitting right here. You know, Ben sees me in trouble, and he helps me out. He can control that. You know, he can't control what I'm going to do tomorrow or what's going to happen to him 2 weeks from now, but he can control what's happening with that interaction. Yes, ma'am.
Some of that is time and chance. I think a lot of that is God, much more than we give him credit for. You know, it reminds me of Psalm 37:25. I've been young and now I am old, yet I have not seen the righteous abandoned or his children begging for bread. When you take care of God's people, God will make sure that you're okay.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and I think that's very much one of the ideas around this, is that you particularly, right, let us do good to all men, especially to the household of faith, right? We want to take care of God's people. But I think kind of what's in here too is, you know what? Even if it's a bad guy, and you got it in your means to help him, help him. You know, what does that hurt? Yes, sir.
Point. I think verses 1 and 2 would lend themselves to the idea that sometimes maybe we're too choosy how we're generous and who we're generous with, where basically the idea, the concept here in wisdom is, be kind, generous, and share with all. And it will find its way back to you. It's the whole pay it forward kind of idea.
Yeah.
But good things will happen to you if you're kind to others. And sometimes maybe we're a little bit too discerning in who we show kindness to. Obviously, like you just quoted, we're supposed to favor our brethren. But that doesn't mean that we should be picking and choosing amongst non-brethren and brethren who we do and don't help.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes, and just to kind of tie back to that New Testament reference too, how many times is that really the choice, right? Well, I can give the $10 to Lauren, or I can give it to Joe on the corner here. Well, she's a Christian, I'm going to give her the 10, right? I mean, maybe sometimes, but generally speaking, we probably got enough to go around in America. Not everybody does. I understand that, but our generosity, isn't just limited to money. Sometimes it's stuff. Sometimes it's help and time. Sometimes, there's all kinds of ways that we can extend that generosity. And kind of having the mindset is what I think is being taught here. You don't know what's going on. I've already proven to you that time and chance is involved. I've already taught you that accumulating possessions is not going to bring you satisfaction. So I've taught you to enjoy what God has given you, and here's another opportunity for you to enjoy something, because let's face it, it feels pretty good to share. And so when you help somebody out, there's an element of enjoyment, and I think it's God-given. When we take care of others, that is one of the things that we get for it. And don't overthink it. So there is a little of what comes around goes around there. But if everything is vanity, why are we holding on so tightly? That's the piece that we got to kind of capture there. All right, so then we get to chapter 12. All right, he has done everything he could, even right before there, at the end of chapter 11, when he says, "Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, walk in the ways of your heart, sight of your eyes, but remember that God is going to bring you into judgment." Really kind of the last thing that he's going to kind of toss out there from a, enjoy the things that God has given you perspective. And he's basically talking to the younger people and saying, enjoy yourself, because he's getting ready to talk about it doesn't get more fun the older you get, but, enjoy yourself, but remember that there is God. And so when we talk about justice, people getting away with things and there's injustice and there's all this other stuff, not really, not in the end. There is a God who's paying attention and he is going to observe, that. So it's interesting then, he goes right into remember the Creator in your days of your youth. And it really fits with the previous verses. Remember, the chapters are kind of artificial here, right? So, before the difficult days come, before the years draw when you say, I have no pleasure in them. And then really poetic language in here about what it looks to me like what it's like to get old, right? What's it like to get old? Well, you can't see the sun and the stars as well, right? You have fewer teeth, and the teeth that you have, the grinders, they don't work that well, right? And it talks about the doors are, the sound of grinding is low. I can't hear that well, right? But I can hear the bird at 4 a.m. That wakes me up, right? All the things about, just the progression of age. And he talks about all that, and he keeps coming back to remember your Creator. Remember him in your youth. Remember him before the dark days come. Remember him before the silver cord is loose. And I kind of take this thought back to a living dog is better off than a dead lion. Because while we're alive, there is hope. And so he's imploring us at every stage of our lives to remember the Creator, that it's never too late to remember the Creator and to put him in that priority. So, even as all these things are happening to us, they are just reminders that this life is temporary and that there is more beyond it for us to deal with. And not deal with in a bad way for those that are following after the Lord, right? We've got a whole new chapter that we get to be a part of. When the physical limitations to this body don't matter anymore because we get a new one. And those are the things that we focus on, as he keeps going through there, because he finishes up the poem with vanity of vanities, all is vanity, right? And so that's really the end of his instruction set. But then he says, now because the preacher was wise, he taught people all of this stuff, right? And that's really the charge that we have, right? Because we have been given the wisdom from Ecclesiastes. We've been told what the end of all of these journeys are, and we've been told there's nothing better for us than to enjoy the gifts of God, so we need to teach that to others as well. And so when he says, fear God and keep his commandments, this is man's all, for God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil, that's kind of a benediction to saying, you have all of the information you need to have a life that is well lived, that you can look back on and say, I really enjoyed my life, and I remembered my Creator, and I feared what he had for me to do. And I feared it in the sense that I respected it, and I honored it, and I tried to do it. So that's Ecclesiastes in 2 lessons. Next 2 weeks, we're going to do Job in 2 lessons. Now, I only gave like the first part of Job and the last part of Job as the reading. y'all feel free to fill in the, 30 or so chapters in the middle. But we're going to talk about, we're going to focus on that first chunk and then the last chunk in the last 2 weeks. Thank you all for your time.